If I hear that, then like, I can just start to get very inspired. And even if it's tiny.
Yeah, it's so subtle on the record.
It can just...
It really brings it in. Oh, well, keep that, keep that. Where's your mellotron?
These days of my life are feeling very reminiscent of the days of when I started playing music. I don't want to step outside of what I love to do. I want to drill further in what I love to do. I really just tend to work with people who just have a gut feeling about something and just want to find it. That's all making an album is. The kind of music I'm writing and the stories I'm telling, the magic is honestly like right now.
We all know the achievements. 3-time consecutive award-winning Grammy Producer of the Year. His hands have touched music that's reached billions of people. But Jack Antonoff's true gift to the world is he's able to draw deep truth through art, whether it's in his work with others or on a brand new Bleachers album, self-titled and easily their best yet. So how does Jack Antonoff do it? Well, every great producer will tell you they should hide their hand. But my job is to get Jack Antonoff to show it.
Well, I mean, I love being in New York in the rain.
I'm happy to experience it with you.
Yeah, New Jersey's finest New Yorker. Am I the I guess I'm the unreliable reporter.
No, I'm the unreliable reporter. You're the opposite. You're the reliable reporter.
We'll see.
I'm the one who can say what I want in the song, and it doesn't have to be anything but besides whatever the hell I said.
And yet people hear it and they decide to hold you accountable for these things. And I wonder what the relationship is like between honesty in the moment and then this kind of analytical approach to your honesty later on by people who hear the songs, you know?
Well, that's why I sort of remove afterwards, because it's like, if you write the song, then you wrote the song, and it's a little bit like dreaming, or if you do therapy or analysis or anything like that.
Do you kind of feel accountable for your dreams?
Yeah, it's like, you know, people are always like, I had the craziest dream, like I murdered my grandmother and then this happened, that happened.
What does it mean?
And it's like, well, it's like, no, you wrote it. And I like remembering when you wake up, like you wrote all of that, no one else was a part of it.
But you can't separate yourself altogether. Like surely you can't finish an album as personal as this one, self-titled as this one, and then just leave it for the world to absorb and not somehow.
No, I have to. I feel like at this point in my life, I feel like I'm really like, every night when I get into bed, sometimes I think about like all these things going on, and then I literally, in an absurd way, just have to be like, fuck it. Otherwise, I'll get caught up in it, and finishing an album is like the perfect example of that. Like it's so much, and there's so much anxiety, and you've shared so much, and you could like run stock about all the things you said about people who are real people in your life and things you said about yourself. Things that are so personal you wouldn't even share them in conversation, yet you blast them out to the world, and you have no choice, or I have no choice if I'm gonna like emotionally survive, then just be like, a lot of my days end with just going like, cool, like dinner time, turn the whole fucking thing off, like turn off the whole machine. Otherwise, I know my personality would eat me alive.
Did leaving New York help you do that?
Sometimes being in New York helps me do that.
Why is that though? You and I and billions of people around the world are similar, like elements of anxiety and depression through my whole life. Searching for a host, searching for a way to make sense of it. You know, it needs a place to resonate. Why do we get drawn to the Londons and the New Yorks and the big cities when the energy here is frantic?
I like how anonymous it is. Okay, one of the bedrocks to me of like feeling misunderstood, othered, depression, anxiety, or any of those things is like this fear of like doing something that's like off or other. And I like that, like right now, if you like got on the ground and just started like smashing head on the floor and like screaming jet fuel can't melt steel beams, like no one would do anything. And there's a real relief to being completely unseen. I don't know, especially if you're any kind of like public person, sort of nice, like I'll walk down the street and someone might say like, hi, and I'll be like, hi. But like if I'm in like a small town, sometimes I feel like you're like literally more seen as like a human being.
Yeah.
People are like actually watching your expressions. Yeah, it's really easy to get lost in New York. That's why David Bowie was able to live here so long.
Yeah.
And no one ever like I don't know. It's a good place to be if you don't want to actually be overly witnessed.
Yeah.
And I also like the feeling of, I look at apartments and I see like everyone's like locked into their little cubbies.
Yeah.
But it also feels like everyone's kind of
together.
Yeah, there's a togetherness. I don't know. I just keeps you in touch with whatever culture of your time it is. You just see lots of different people.
And I think about like the music that's come out of here or the music that's been inspired by here. I was trying to figure out my favorite New York songs.
Okay.
I mean, Empire State of Mind, obviously, you know, I think obviously the Frank Sinatra, New York, New York.
I like a lot of the New York music I like is, like I talk a lot about where you're reporting from.
Yeah.
And I like, one of the reasons why I like New York so much is I've always been reporting from New Jersey. Emotionally, that's kind of hopped up and hopeful and sincere. The New York reporting is often very like, have seen it all. And so I like when I listen to like the Velvet Underground or
New York City Cops.
yeah, like Strokes records, like anything that's like quintessential New York, like there's a perspective that's so not me.
Yeah.
That's just so like, I went to high school, junior and senior year in the city, and all the kids that were from New York, they were just like old.
New York, I love you, but you're bringing me down.
Yeah, they were just like, they had done all the things, like they were so unshocked growing up in New York, and I was so like amazed by, and you never lose that. Like if you're not from a place, like I have that with tons of cities. I have that when I go to London. I'm seeing it for the first time no matter how many times I go.
But you took some ownership over your experience in Jesus is Dead, the third song on the album, where you reference that, you know, it's not the same city. You know, that, do you remember DFA? Do you remember Long Wave? Like, I miss it.
Oh man, when I was coming up and when I was a teenager driving into the city from New Jersey and experiencing the birth of what became that Strokes, Long Wave, Mooney Suzuki,
Radio 4,
that whole
Moldy Peaches.
Yeah, become romanticized.
West Seas Graveyard.
Yeah, like experiencing it, I was like, this is happening. And you know, everyone else in the room was like, fuck this. Like New York died with television or Velvet Under. You know, there was always a story.
Yeah.
That line in Jesus is Dead, I find myself, to me, that's less about the city and more about like prosecuting, like what is, I care a lot about music and community and scene, so I just got thinking a lot about like, what is the music scene in the age when everything's discoverable? Because think about it like this, for better or worse, like the best part of a music scene is that there's something brilliant and then people gather towards it to A, protect it,
Yeah.
and B, feel the heat from it, right?
Yeah.
That's what I felt.
Until it gets too hot, then it belongs to everybody else.
Well, then the dark side is when those people start A, gatekeeping it,
Yeah.
or B, sort of, you know, hating it because it left, you know, I remember.
But how can you do that, to your point? How can you do that right now where the fire has been broken up into billions of different...
That's exactly what I wonder in the song, and that's why I'm fascinated with like the work that comes out of, basically what is this fire that we're protecting, right? There's very little that someone could tell me that I couldn't look up. I get sort of obsessive where is that new energy? And ironically, for me it's on the roof of my studio, because that's just become this place where like, it's funny to call me and my circle like a scene, because a lot of us are like making things that a lot of people hear, but everyone kind of just like doesn't talk about it and puts their shit away, and it's not documented. And so I'll clarify, we're the scene in the way that I feel creative in a scene.
Yeah.
Which is, and to me what that is a space where it's sort of like you can't really access anything unless you're there, other than the bits that are put it out. So it's like this really magical place, right? Music and collaborations come out of it, and then what the world hears is what the world hears, and then the rest is to be dreamed about. And that to me, and by the way, it's not like, that's not something I'm trying to create, that's just like literal. It's like, we're not documenting it in the way that to me would spoil it. But yeah, that's my scene. Are we good?
Yeah. I don't know how it can be documented anyway in that shape anymore.
Well, there's pressure too. You know, I mean, like our brain chemistry's changed so much that like, I think we all have this feeling sometimes, which is like, oh man, I wish I documented that day in the studio, because holy fuck, it was so special. But I think this is also why I like the studio a lot, is because the documents we're making remind me of the world I've known and loved. And there's something about being in the studio where it's like, no matter what, whether I'm in like yesterday, tomorrow, or like the year 3000, it's like we're recording music and that's it. And then it's all for the idea that someone will hear that and imagine what we were feeling in that room.
Yeah.
So it is funny. I know it's absurd to call it like sceney, but it reminds me of like
it makes sense when I hear
being a kid in the Wayne Firehouse and sort of like, if you're not here, you're not here, and that's it.
But it sounds like that when you hear the records you produce and the records you make with Bleachers. You get a sense that you're trying to preserve some experience, and that we get a chance to experience that by listening to it. But it doesn't feel like it's transactional the way that photos do now. You just take it, you send it.
Yeah.
Comments do now, information does now, articles do. Everything's just so transactional, right? Everyone's curating everyone else's life all the time.
The interesting thing about making records, especially if you're making records as albums that will come out later, you do have to like chuck the goalpost as far as like where you think the world will be or where you'd want the world to be. So there is a lot of like hopeful dreaming involved.
I'm excited to go into the studio. I love this place.
Yeah, as soon as I walk in, I feel pretty removed from the things I feel stressed about in the world.
Well, you spend so much time in here, that's probably...
Beatles-esque shot of me and Zane being strange with umbrellas.
Thank you, buddy. So I'm gonna sign in?
Yeah. Sign in and date it too. Date it. Don't forget the year. Good. So we come up here. That's Studio C. That's the bathroom.
Yeah.
This is the lounge.
Yeah. Whoa, hang on. This is beautiful.
Yeah,
Look
this is
at
cool.
this. Wow.
There's a lot of cute pictures. There's like
This is a studio apartment in New York City.
my grandmother is my mom. This is good. I used to, when I went to camp when I was a kid, they'd have these like pre-made cards. Dear Grandma and Zadie, how are you? I am fine. The weather here is good. The kids are very nice. The food is good. I hope to make the basketball team. The best thing about camp is sports. From Jack, P.S. Love you.
It's so great. It's like enforced communication.
When I went to camp.
Who's this? That's your mom?
That's my mom.
Wow. That's you at the professional children's school?
That's my school ID when I went to art school in the city for 2 years. It's my suicide mug.
Yeah.
It's a cute picture of Lana singing at my wedding. And this is where we are every day.
Wow, this place is amazing. How long
Yeah,
have you
my
been
little
here?
New York scene happens right here.
Your scene.
Yeah, my scene.
So in case you're wondering where New York's latest scene
Yeah, we know
is.
what the scene is, yeah.
Okay.
It's right there, and I guess no one's invited. But
So you've been here how long?
oh, I've been here years.
Like before producing other people?
I guess maybe 2015, 16 is when I started coming a
That's it.
lot.
Yeah.
And I was downstairs for a little bit, and then I transferred up here. I like it because I love studios, but I also love the energy of not studios.
What do you mean?
All right, like take this out. You're at a basketball court. Like where you play basketball is where you play basketball. The hoop is the hoop is the hoop, right? Studios are funny because they're not where people hear music, and you can get very literal on this idea. Like I don't really like big speakers or anything too intense because I don't literally. I don't want to be hearing frequencies that commercial headphones don't even play back. And so what I like about this place is we can make some of the best recordings in the world. We have all the best gear, but it's basically an apartment. Like it's not overly treated. It's a little funny. It's small. It's there's this feeling sometimes when you walk into like a big studio and you feel like Mariah Carey, and it's just a feeling that doesn't resonate for me. Like I like to be in like a feeling like a home environment, like a little more connected to where people are going to hear the music. And so that's what makes this place perfect, because it's truly both.
You don't have to say who it was, but when was the last time somebody walked in here for the first time? Because I know that Lana comes here, Taylor comes here, Annie comes here, 75 probably came here a bunch. So you've got your scene, but when was the last time somebody came in and walked in here for the first time to see you?
Kind of recently.
Okay, who was it?
It's really you'll know soon. But it's usually people pretty quickly get it. Well, it's a pretty inviting place. I mean, it's also...
It feels safe.
It's very safe. You're in New York, so the whole city's kind of right out there. I don't particularly like I know in the pandemic, I made a lot of records out of necessity that were like destination recordings. I love those albums, and it was a great process, but for me, I'm way more interested in being in one's life. I think then the leaving of the studio is almost as creative as the coming to the studio, because then you're on this sort of like thinking of what you've done, remembering it, hoping, wondering, coming back, hearing what's better. It's this like living process where when you live in something and you don't go home, I think you can fool yourself a little bit more. So I love the nature of this place being right in the middle of New York City, where it's like a place I come, but I leave. You know, I wouldn't want to live here.
Yeah, it's routine. It's your process.
And it's also so much bullshit to this like mythology of music. Like I'm at my best like 11, 12, 1 p.m., 2 p.m., like that pocket when like I'm not weighed down by the day.
But you learn how to do that, right?
But the industry tells you the other, like all the books,
And
the
you fell
movies.
into that trap, didn't you, early on? Were you like an all-nighter? Did you make yourself sick?
I literally almost died. I got such a bad pneumonia, I was in the ICU.
Because of overwork?
For no other reason than just like not sleeping.
Isn't that what the 20s is? I'm not saying the 20s is for going to ICU, but isn't that point of kind of ambition to the point of stupidity, a point of being young to some degree?
I think that ambition is beautiful. I think harming yourself and wearing it like a badge is foolish. And I think I did a little of that when I was younger. And I see people who still do a lot of that.
So where did that mythology come from for you? Who were you sort of emulating to some degree, or what scene or what vibe? Or where does it come from?
I think I grew up in the generation of, you know, we were still sort of poisoned by this like heroin, all night, sticky floor, you know, and I was coming up in the Jersey punk scene, then into the indie scene in New York.
And you were young when you started, right? You're like 16 when you...
Even younger. My first tour I was 15. It was pretty rough, and there was still like, I hesitate to use the idea of like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but there was a roughness around this profession that it just was. I imagine it's no different than certain corporate professions where like you're expected to work. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. And I work my ass off and I love it. And I love touring, I love being in the studio all the time. But what I didn't realize was, you know, the magic is when the fucking magic is. The magic isn't when you're fucked up at 3 a.m. For some people it is, and that's cool. But for me, it's like the kind of music I'm writing and the stories I'm telling, the magic is like, honestly, like right now. Like, I feel like myself. I haven't been poisoned by the day yet. What I mean by that is like, you know, every day is a new beginning. And when you wake up in the morning and someone shot up at school, you're done. You know, you're emotionally cooked. Doesn't mean you can't do something good, but your body is vibrating. When you wake up in the morning and something's going on in your family, when you wake up in the morning and you eat the wrong thing, like there's so much literal and emotional sort of like poisoning. So every day that I wake up and I can get to the studio before something has like shattered my existence, and I'm not being overly dramatic, this is the times we live in, I'm grateful and I do things, and then at some point throughout the day, whether I'm reading about the state of the world or someone in my personal life, a friend, or my goddamn own emotions, I will disintegrate. And that is when I start focusing more on food, talking to friends and family, and watching TV.
Did you ever focus on other things? Were drugs and drink ever an issue for you?
Yeah, I did a lot of drugs when I was young. And then I had a very profound experience, which I'm very grateful for, which is, and it was before, like, when I was a kid getting messed up, you know, like, pills weren't bad, so you could just, like, take different pills, and, you know, there was kind of pre-fentanyl, and we didn't know what was what, so we'd get really fucked up. But then when my sister died when I was 18, I was in a band, we were touring a lot, and it was obviously just so fucked up emotionally that I took a whole bunch of mushrooms one night with some friends, and I completely freaked out. I completely lost my mind, and I think it was a combination of how much I took and the grief. And the long story short is, I was so fucked up from that experience that to this day I feel allergic. Sometimes I'll have a drink or two, get a little drunk. I just, boom. I never want it to be out of control again. And I'm grateful that I made that stupid mistake because a lot of my friends struggled. I know a lot of people who have struggled and continue to struggle. So I got lucky that my rock bottom was more one that was mixing psychedelics and grief and not like, you know, needles and fast cars and whatnot.
It's a crazy thing, grief. You know, it's you know, we're so scared of it, but it's one of the most it's one of the sharpest tools in terms of cutting out the stone, isn't it?
It's really weird when you are confronted with mortality because no one talks about it.
I know. But I also think because people don't know what to say.
Yeah.
So it's hard to listen to as well. It's not just I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's like I see you struggling to know what to say.
I think it's harder than ever because we've culturally decided that now we talk about grief, now we talk about depression, but we don't. You know, we sell it. I mean, culturally, like the sense of it. Someone told me recently, they were like, there's more TikToks on domestic abuse than there are like beauty products. And I remember hearing that and being like, wow, that's amazing. I'm glad we're talking about stuff. And then I was also like, the man upstairs doesn't care what we're talking about because the attention's how they make their money. Point I'm making is as the conversation becomes out there, there's even something isolating about that because I think that words like grief and trauma and depression are so commonly used right now that we almost like need new words for people who are like really
Struggling.
really down there because there's depression and then there's not leaving the house. That's why I like what Jews do with Shiva. They make, if anyone doesn't know, when someone dies for a week, everyone just has to come to your house and like bring you food and you have to cover the mirrors and you rip your shirt if you're the one mourning. It just is like this sort of like meat and potatoes, no pun intended with the food, but like you can't survive, we're taking care of you. And I think about that a lot when my sister died because I know that like if your dog dies, you get this amount of time. If your grandma dies, you get this amount of time. If your parent dies, you get this amount of time. If a sibling dies, you get more, especially if they're young. But they're just these sort of like vague concepts. And one of the most gripping and formative experiences of my life was when everyone forgot. And I don't blame anyone, but when life really carried on. And I was still there. I was still in, Grief Town, and everyone just sort of moves on, and life does carry on, which is beautiful. You really gotta fucking drag yourself into reality again. And it's not only the hardest work in the world, it's also so sad because to re-enter reality is to also leave some stuff in the past.
There's a lyric on the album, one of my favorite songs on the record, where you talk about you were just a kid when they told you you were born to bleed, little soldier, magnet heart, sentimental boulder.
I wrote that about my wife.
About your wife?
The song's about her, and then I'm Not Gassing is my favorite lyric on the album because the line is, you were just a kid when they told you you'd born to bleed, endless soldier with your garden heart and sentimental
Magnet heart
boulder.
comes later, yeah.
That pulled you down, but look at you, you made it out.
Yeah.
But I like this, when I first started writing that, I had this idea of a sentimental boulder. A lot of people I connect with, you're sort of like carrying around this thing that's beautiful and horrible. But then at the last chorus, I make it about me. I was just a kid when they told me this great big weight would come and pull me like your magnet heart and your sentimental boulder I carry with you. It's a song about marriage.
I realize now you've been writing songs from an emotional standpoint in many respects to pay tribute and heal at the same time, to try to find your way through this grief.
Yeah.
And Bleachers has served this purpose. And we get swept up in the euphoria of the live shows and the sounds of the records, and great writing, great momentum and energy. But you've been searching for a way to understand how to move forward. And I feel like that song being at the center of the album, because I'm a two-sided human.
Yeah.
I like side A and I like side B.
Me too. Intentional. Very.
And I feel like that sits on the record really as a way of saying I'm ready to transfer now some of that energy that I've been carrying with me into something different.
Very much. This is exactly how I mean it. I see marriage and partnership in a very intense way. It's easy to share the fun stuff with someone, but will you share the really ugly parts of yourself? It's not an attractive part of myself. Yeah, I can spin an attractive concept that sounds poetic about someone dealing with grief, but the day-to-day of that is not fun and attractive. I wanted to celebrate that in that song. Or I tried to.
This album has found itself in a...
Don't worry if it was any of my gear.
Should we go next door?
What was it?
Let's go next door.
So this is the live room.
Is this your collection?
No, that's Lee's, who owns the studio.
Can you believe it's just sitting right in there? That's the perfect spot. By design, I'm sure. So I collect vinyl and I'm really into it.
God, what a fucking joy to live in a time when it's all coming back. It's the greatest fuck you to everyone I've ever sat in a room with who explained to me where the music business was going. I just love, for a million reasons, I love what's going on with vinyl, but for that reason, it's just the ultimate mic drop of just like, no. Like, in a capitalist system, something that is going like this for a minute is a failure to you, but they often go like this, and for the rest of us is very important.
So here's a question. Where do you hope Bleachers sits in my record collection?
Where do I hope it sits?
Yeah.
I'll tell you where I hope it sits. I have a kind of album that I like to put on when I'm having a good morning, when I don't have to go anywhere, and it's like maybe like 11 a.m. and I'm around the house and I'm thinking like, cool, I have a house and I have a life, and I put on a record that I want to, I don't know, that moment. For me, those albums are like, I listen to Bob Dylan's New Morning a lot in that time. I think Bruce is good for that time. But I guess this place where I'm really writing it from is behind the wheel of a car is driving, is leaving, exploring, and then sort of turning back around all over again is definitely the place where I know that the audience takes it.
That's where I feel it. It's interesting that Bleachers became that journey for you because you were on a different journey for a while there. I mean, you started touring when you were 15. You moved around from sort of proto-punk type environments to sort of hybrids of that, but the whole thing felt very DIY, at least from what I can tell.
I think a lot of people have a hard time imagining that because people often take you where you land.
So you're the 2-time Grammy Award-winning producer of the year who works with Taylor Swift and Lana Del Rey. Why could you not have grown up in a van?
It's a little. I get it. I mean, if I'm talking to someone about sort of the punk scene I grew up in or how we used to tour and play shows, there's like sometimes I feel like people are like, "Are you like doing a thing right now where
you're trying to prove yourself?"
Yeah, I'm like, no, it's just how I grew up.
Right. When during those early days when you were kind of traveling around playing to nobody in a van with people that you were gonna share a very small amount of your life with, when was it most real? Like, was there an experience when it was like, holy shit, that just happened? Or you felt like you were really touching the void like all bands do when they go out and making it up as they go along?
Well, I always feel like it's the same feeling, but it's a different thing at different times. So like, there was a time in my life where if we could play the Knitting Factory, we would have made it. And we did, and then what if we could play Bowery Ballroom? And then what if we could tour, and then the first shows outside of New Jersey was like Connecticut.
What's the maddest shit that happened on tour? Do you remember anything?
It's crazy. It was a lawless time. Like when I first started touring, I would go to MapQuest.com, print out directions from every venue to every venue, from New Jersey to Florida to Texas and back around, and then we just find places to stay along the way. And it was like, people talk about Florida being weird now. It's like, Florida was really weird then, experience, but you just saw crazy shit. And, the feeling now of something that might seem really big is no different than the feeling of like, what if we got to leave our state?
Yeah.
You just have these markers, and I think it's natural and healthy for the markers to grow as you grow, but I think what matters is just holding on to that feeling of just sort of like, oh, cool, like I did something that meant something to me. And now that I've done it, something else means something to me, and that's how it's meant to be.
There was a time in the UK where I felt like I couldn't turn on Radio 1 where I worked and not hear a Fun song. And I wondered what that felt like when you'd sort of gone from band to band to band, and then this idea that the three of you had became this gigantic thing. Because it really was. I think people, I'm sure Fun fans remember, but some people will conveniently forget that for 18 months, it was there for you. It was there for you.
It was my first experience of, there's not some like Illuminati door, of just sort of like, because there was no weird, we made our second album and a bunch of those songs blew up, and I was on the radio for the first time and doing all those, I always had like a line in the music business that was just over for me, because I always looked at Spoon and Wilco and those kind of bands. I was like, that's it. I'm going to tour and I'm going to get to the point where I can get 1,000 people, 1,500, maybe 2,000, maybe 4. Get real touring audience, and that's all I fucking care about. That's all I care about. I mean, what those bands have done is brilliant. And that's it. And I always thought the radio and Grammys and the MTV Awards and all this sort of like that side of the music industry was like for Lady Gaga or something. It was so off my radar of because I think I was probably 25 at the time and I felt very old. So I've been at it so long, and I had just been on this. I always interpret it like the county road next to the highway. People shoot by you and those guys we just played a show with, they're fucking huge.
There goes like, the mega bus.
Yeah, and I'm just like, and so I was just sort of like, cool, like this is, I was really proud, a very, very proud human being at that time of what I was able to accomplish. We were starting to draw people. I had a band called Steel Train and Fun at that time, respectively. We were starting to fill small venues, like really, really respectable stuff. And so when that cracked open and that side of the industry opened up, I was just like, hello, that's odd, and the biggest takeaway I had from it is there wasn't some weird deal with the devil. And then after those Fun records at that time and all that stuff was blowing up, I didn't really enjoy it much because I only was working on Bleachers. I was very anxious about having success for records that weren't records that was sort of coming from me.
People don't often do that. They don't take a look at their break. I'm not saying that's how you saw it, but most people would work all their life up to that point to play these kind of festivals and be at the Grammys and whatever, and get phone calls to work with people and get remixes, blah, blah, but you know, this is it, this is the world.
Yeah.
They wouldn't think like, I'm gonna go away now quietly, privately, and make a record in my bedroom and call it something else, and then take a photo of me on my bed and make it black and white and write a whole bunch of really introspective songs. They just would be like, I've got to make this moment count. I got to build on this moment. Why did you decide to not stick it out and just ride that road?
I had spoken in the language of songwriting and felt myself through my writing my whole life. And so for all the joy of how successful that band was getting, it wasn't my story. So I was, you know, from 12 years old, just writing my life and then always was and never stopped. And fun was always kind of the side project. So it was a little awkward for me when it got so big because I was just like, oh no, like, this is great. But also like, this is this journey I'm on of writing my experience. And so I worked beyond overtime to make sure that that didn't suffer. You know, so many people go from like producer to like wanting to have their own project or something like that. I think it's also funny when I realize that not everyone knows that I've always kind of had my own band and been a songwriter since I was a kid, and that was almost the first thing. I was producing the records too, I shouldn't call it that at the time.
I think it's partly why we're here.
Yeah, there's always a funny rub between your actual story,
Yeah.
your mythology,
Yeah.
and then what you want people to focus on.
So is that why Bleachers...
There's a lot of mythology around me that I'm like, all right.
Well, yeah, but The Guardian recently, right, Respect, I thought summed up Bleachers brilliantly. They said that they called Bleachers self-mythologizing, which for a start, I think is wonderful. Number two, I think every artist to some degree is self-mythologizing because that's what the work ultimately creates is some form of mythology. But I understand the point being that when you put on a Bleachers album, even on this album, you put on Modern Girl, it's like, man, we play like a heart attack for you, you know, and we shout out Evan and we shout out Mikey. There's a moment in Self-Respect and the crowd goes wild.
Yeah.
And the crowd goes wild. And I know that there's a twist in the tale and what the crowd's going wild for, but it's like you are kind of creating this mythology around the band through the art.
That's the thing about a shared experience with a band and the heightened experiences that you live together is there is so much mythology. And you do lose track as a band of like, you know, you become these characters, not even to the public, to each other. Yeah, you do something as a unit that is fantastic and amazing and wild and so dialed in that you can be loose. It's the craziest experience, you know, to have this weird life that you live together that can be mundane, but in many ways is all that insanity and the beauty of kind of just like living, you're a bit off the grid, you know, when you move around as a band.
It's true. And the dynamic of bands is unique and not talked about enough anymore because there's such a move towards the solo experience. Or, you know, I've got technology, I can do it myself. Why would I share it?
Yeah.
Bleachers is such a shared experience. Seeing the band live is pretty euphoric for everybody on stage and in the crowd. Doesn't it all frustrate Evan or Mike or anyone else in the band that people still perceive Bleachers as a Jack Antonoff project?
I mean, I guess you'd have to ask them, but I don't think so because within the concept of doing a number of things, I'm so at peace with people not getting the whole story besides the audience, all I care about. They get everything. You know, when we play a show, everyone in that room knows every member of that band. They know what they're doing. They understand every inside joke, every marquee moment, every time. They get the whole thing. So it's like, I was very anxious about that. Once again, I don't want to speak for the band, but in the context of how I see it and the way I deal with that in my life, before Bleachers really had this audience, you know, something happened around the last tour where the level of the audience grew. I was just sort of like, I don't need more than this. I don't need to be perfectly understood by the world. If I can have this place where everyone comes and gets the whole thing, and it's more than Bleachers. A lot of these people, if not all of them, understand the records I'm producing and writing, and they understand all the little Easter eggs sewn through all of it. But you get to a point where you're like, anyone else who's not getting the full picture, it's like, well, then that's totally cool. I also feel like I spent a certain amount of time in my life in the past agitated about being misunderstood, and it made me feel a little bored, you know, like chasing something that disappears once you find it.
Has it been helpful working with so closely and forging such strong relationships with a certain kind of artist that feels misunderstood all the time? You know, I'm sure there are days when Lana's just like, you know what, fuck it, you don't get me, right? And we know how Taylor feels because she has to exist in that space. This is her safe space, but out there, a constant judgment from one reason or another.
Everyone's writing about it, so I feel like the interesting thing about being misunderstood is, man, I don't know if it's a goal to feel understood by the general public. It's sort of like to be public and be known by a lot of people is to be misunderstood, and I've yet to, I don't know, I take a lot of comfort in a lot of people I've known who I have great respect for who just kind of still feel that way. And like I said, you just focus on your people. I told you my theory about being at a party. Okay, an artist and their audience, it's a relationship. Springsteen calls it a conversation. Everyone has a different word for it, but it's just a relationship, right? So I'm talking to you. The first album, maybe you're wowed. I'm new. I'm exciting to you. I mean, the second album, we go deeper. Third album, you might be mad at me. You might not like what I did, and we're arguing about it. But in the fourth album, maybe you understand why I did it. Maybe on the fifth album, you're mad again, but you know what? You know, we're just in this long relationship, you and I. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And we stick with each other and we believe in each other, whether we agree or disagree, whatever it is. The second me as an artist that I go like this, like you die. That feeling when you're at a party and someone's looking at you and they look away for a second, looking for something better. It's so subtle and it's so heartbreaking. It just destroys you. You will never trust me again, and you shouldn't. And that's why all that matters is this dead set, long relationship with your fan base. The second you look for something else, and that can be done in many ways. You can just feel it when an artist does it. The person, the heart and soul that you're talking to, they disappear as they should, because it's the most disrespectful thing you can do. And so I think about that all the time. And when I'm writing music and when I'm expressing something, I think about the need to express it, and then I think about who I'm expressing it to, and I just, even if I know it's going to bother them, I'm just with them. Yeah, I think it's the most dangerous thing you can do artistically is take your eye off of your people.
You brought up Bruce, and so much of the DNA of when I listen to a Bleachers record, and I'm going to word this really thoughtfully because I don't want it to draw a direct comparison, but it creates a similar feeling.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, it creates a feeling that I get listening to not just Bruce's records, but certain records that Afghan Wigs give me that feeling.
Yeah, I get that from like Hold Steady.
Yeah, Hold Steady give me that feeling, you know, that Greg Dooley to me, like, tonight I say goodbye to everyone who loved me.
Yeah.
You know, stick it to my enemies tonight. But he's in a car on a train or going somewhere while he's saying it.
It's fantastical, but it's born of a understandable place. I've always liked that kind of music where I feel like I'm friends with the person who's singing me the thing, but then they'll say something where I'm like, whoa. You know,
so what happens when you become friends with the person who's singing you the thing? I mean, what happens
Bruce?
when you, yeah.
Oh, well, Bruce, you know, you don't meet your idols unless your idol's Bruce Springsteen. That's the quote, right? You know, but actually that's true for everyone. Great. The thing about New Jersey and the sound, and Bruce being the sort of the top of that, is that sound is everywhere, man. That sound is in where I'm from. Like that's the sound of the punk scene I grew up in. Like when I hear I heard Australian music in the 90s. Yeah, totally. So to me, why I get so obsessed with New Jersey and the landscape, not only this idea of where I'm reporting from, which is my heart and soul, but it's not just Bruce and it's not just a cool sound. It's a very specific sound that you hear all over the world, but you don't understand right away, you know, when you hear, oh, that's Jamaican music, oh, that's Manchester music, oh, that's that thing coming out of Bristol, that's Japanese, that's Atlanta, you know. New Jersey is this, it's unwieldy, is this thing gonna stay on the track? There's the horns, because it's coastal, but they're not like, you go a little further up and the horns get sort of rich, you go a little further down, they get a little like goofy. It's like the horns in Jersey are they're like so lovelorn and sad, but they're anthemic. It's such a specific sound. I call it Shadow of the City because it's the only massive city in the world that has that sort of medieval, you're right there, the death of energy, the ash of the city falling onto these people who live in New Jersey where I grew up and just looking out their window and seeing it, and you're right there, but you're so far away. It's so potent. It's obviously Southside Johnny, it's Bruce, Patty who's married to Bruce, her albums sound like this. It's the scene I grew up in, it's all the guys from Gaslight Anthem, Save the Day, and My Chemical Romance. I hear it in all of that. I hear it in Paul Simon, who seems to pretend more like it's a New York City thing, but his perspective is Jersey to me. And so it's a torch that first of all, it's who I am, so I wouldn't shake it even if I could, but I do feel very intent on making that clear of just, this is a sound that is really important. But yeah, when I talked to Bruce about it, I mean, he he jokes himself on his Broadway show. He's like, I'm the person who made, I don't know if he says I'm the person who made New Jersey cool. He says something like that, and it's true. You know, when I heard his music growing up, I thought like, you know, it's like seeing someone from your high school like
Do it.
You're like, oh, like, huh. This, and Jersey is a very made fun of place for really no reason. It's extremely misunderstood. It's like fucking Europe, man. There's just everything there.
It's gigantic.
It's everything. It's the most beautiful place and beautiful food and culture. And you want good Italian food, fuck New York City, you go to New Jersey.
I was gonna say, isn't that just a byproduct of being in the shadow of
a
New
lot
York?
of the things that I think New York is famous for, I prefer in New Jersey. Fucking sue me, but I will die on that hill.
Were you gonna say pizza?
Pizza 100% is better in New Jersey. Bagels 100% is better in New Jersey. You know, it's just, you're right outside New York City, and there's a lot of fucking people who never go to New York City.
Yeah.
Don't give a fuck. They're totally removed from it. And there's people like I grew up who are like, but also loved it. And you're like, it's so, this is what Bruce always did so well. It just dares you to dream. He always wrote that so perfectly, just this dares you to dream about getting out, dares you to dream about something else.
But never at the sacrifice of what makes that place home. That's the trick. The trick is to yearn to get in a car or go somewhere, to go and experience life, to escape and find a new beginning. But you'll never, ever, can anyone ever to leave their hometown and truly survive? Are you laughing because there's a lyric on the record? Who sang that?
No, it's the sad lyric.
Who sang that on the album?
That's me.
Yo, you went into character mode on that.
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone in your hometown actually
Why did you put the
survive?
accent on when you sang it?
I don't know, to be honest.
Because it's affected. It's not subtle.
No, there's a little auto-tune on that song. It's a weird song. It's a special one to me. There's a little auto-tune in my voice, and I'm kind of doing voices. You know, sometimes when I'm demoing something, you know, I'm completely free when I'm behind the mic, so I'm just trying shit. And, you know, a lot of times you're finding what you want, and every once in a while you do something and you don't know why you did it, but you're sure it's the take, and you don't know how you're gonna sit with Zane and explain why you put a little country twang in your voice in a very sad moment.
I love it. You know why? Because to me, it's like it's the same thing as keeping Lana speaking off mic in the song. There are things in there that take me out of the compositional infrastructure, which everyone tries to master whether they accept it or not, to try and create perfect craft.
Yeah.
And you are unafraid of putting things in your songs that break that spell.
I've never been that kind of mathematician, technician, and I am not knocking it. It blows my mind people who are, you know, if I like see Max Martin, we'll joke about how we do like opposite things, you know, and he's brilliant. You know, you never want to, I don't want to step outside of what I love to do. I want to explore I want to drill further in what I love to do. You know, so what I love to do is find things that may or may not make sense or a little bit outside of, you know, that's why I love the saxophone so much, why I love hearing Modern Girl on the radio. I don't hear a lot of saxophone. That's why I like, you know, recording vocals a certain way or leaving in these things or that things or going from airtight to really messy just because I always want to, you know, if something's going on and you can hear it out there, you're not compelled to do it, you're compelled to do the thing that you do. So yeah, but I always liked that. I love Beatles recordings. I love growing up and hearing those little things and why is there that thing in this headphone, and those things to me are hooks.
That's painting on canvas from an abstract point of view because you're off the grid. When you're on the grid, what the grid provides us is an ability to be able to move within parameters, and those parameters give us a safe space to achieve, right? But for you, when you're searching for something, a feeling, something that's intangible, what's the process of getting to the place where the grid's not there for you? How do you know when the painting's done?
You know, I always know when it's done, is feeling. The best way I can describe the feeling is when I get this, it's not arrogant, but it's almost this like bullish, like I love this. I just want it to live in the world. The one thing I've gotten better and better about is just listening to that. Because what's crazy about this work is like, none of it adds up to an actual number. So like, it's not like, I did this and we're doing building blocks to get somewhere. Like, it's so fucking random. You know how many records we've recorded this way or this song, and then you spend hours and money and all this stuff doing it, and then you turn around and you're like, I think it's an acoustic song. Yeah. And then you put it down in 10 minutes and it's got more emotional resonance than all the shit you did. And then other stuff, it's just, you have to be so, which is why ego in the studio is so hilarious to me, because it's like ego in church. It's like, what do you know God better than me or something? That's crazy. Like, the studio is like, no one can sit down and write that song. They just hope for it.
Yeah, you're hoping for it, and it's true. And I've learned that over the course of my life, having conversation after conversation about process, that the process is really, out of the artist's genuine control, it lives within the spirit
I see making records as like sitting there with like a net and you're just like hoping for it. And that served me well because you can't put yourself above the process. You can't know when it's going to come from.
Right? It's not a business model to sit there and just wait to capture the things. It's like most people will rent a studio like this, which comes at a cost, and figure out like how they're going to fill the diary in order to pay the
That's
rent.
why the music business is filled with people who are blowhards, is simply because it's one of the few, like, you think you have like a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? Name another multi-billion-dollar industry where you just don't even know how to do the thing or what's going to make the money or not. That's why when we're here, we don't think about that stuff because there's no upside. Like, there's no amount of piano, guitar, hours, mixing, plugins, this. There's no amount of things or things you could add or subtract that give you a result. It is all feeling. It's why I've been very happy to divorce myself from anything that's just not here. You know, everyone I'm making records with, like, we're pretty insular. And people of all different sizes, like, not just people with the privilege to be so, but I really just tend to work with people who just have a gut feeling about something and just want to find it. That's all making an album is.
So what makes you want to say yes?
When I feel that with someone. Another theory, the North Star theory I have, you know, if you and I are looking at the same thing and we want to make something and we're both looking at this thing, our only challenge is the road to get there. Mm-hmm. And that's the easy part. As long as we're not going to give up, as long as we're not going to accept anything that isn't what we see, then our issue is time, cost, life. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. The bad things happen when people see different things. This is why I've never related to like the sort of like cinema version of like, you and I are yelling, you know, this is the sound, motherfucker, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's like, if you don't hear it, you know, like when I think of all the things I do,
yeah,
I can remember every time when we heard it. I remember the moment that I did this. I remember the moment I programmed the beat to I Want to Get Better, and I was like, I just heard it. And then Laura heard it, and then everyone who heard it. I remember the moment Lana, the track was down, but we didn't have the chorus to Mariner's Apartment Complex. She just got behind the mic, she sang that part. She heard it, I heard it, Laura heard it. And if anyone didn't hear how brilliant it was, they're a moron. I remember, you know, there's that little video, but I remember the moment that Taylor was sitting in my apartment and we were doing Getaway Car, and it's like, these things, they tell you what they are and they're pretty unimpeachable, and that's why so I guess that's what I look for, or that's why I know I could do something with someone, is if that's all we're looking for, is just this feeling.
Where does the doubt go? Because there isn't a human being I've met who's an artist at some degree who hasn't faced some form of doubt, self-doubt, doubt that the song won't come, doubt that they can't finish the project. I understand what you're saying about like, as long as we stay consistent and we stay on the road, we'll find a way through.
Yeah. Well, you don't always.
Perhaps the question isn't where does the doubt go? What did you learn to do with the self-doubt?
Well, I think doubt is only a product of fear that you can't do something. And if you simply accept the idea that at some point you'll write your last song or your last good song, I don't know. I'm pretty surprised every time I feel that magic because I don't count on it. I hope for it.
Beautiful, but when you're in the room, whether she's a friend or not, you're sitting down with Taylor, who is, in my opinion, the greatest songwriter of the generation. You're saying that you get yourself into a room with her and you're able to forget it all.
Yeah, because...
Forget everything that's come before, forget everything that's waiting for you outside.
Definitely forget everything that's come before because all it can do is weigh you down.
Yeah.
Every time we do something new, I joke, I guess we still got it, because there's no reason for it to keep coming the way it does. There's a lot of magic there. I feel that way with Taylor. I feel that way with Lana. I feel that way with my band. There's people I've had these long relationships with where I'm just like the opposite of expecting it. It's almost like the more we do, the less I expect it, because I often think to myself, well, how much longer could we really keep having this spark? And I'm just grateful that it's there, and I don't know where it comes from or where it goes, but the one thing that I've noticed is that anyone who claims to know where it comes from and where it goes burns out pretty fucking quick.
So are you competitive?
Artistically, I'm like competitive to a point that like hurts my body. Like it makes it like hard to like lay the stuff down and have a life outside of it.
So who are you competing with, and in what regard?
Just myself, and where like I said, just to drill further and further and further into what I'm doing and push it further and further forward. And
so only competing with your own with your
Oh
own
yeah,
results?
I wouldn't want to compete with anyone else because where's their competition? No one in the world has ever been like, I have a song today, I'm good. There's plenty of space.
So if an artist goes to another producer and makes a record, does that resonate with you in any other way apart from great?
No, it feels great. I feel. I mean, I've worked with lots of different producers in my day, and I don't think it's particularly normal to have these ongoing relationships. I think they're really rare and magical.
Yeah.
So like, I'm pretty loose about stuff. Like, no one like signs contracts when they walk in the door. We just work, and when we make things, then they come out, and everything's fair and cool and whatnot. But like, there's no expectation. If anything, there's more an element of shock and thrill when you're able to access another chapter, because it's just rare. And I don't know why, but I've gotten a few experiences like that.
Yeah.
It's rare for a band to stay prolific. It's rare for, I mean, the pivot is wonderful and thrilling, but the holiest grail is to go further.
Further and further. That can be uncomfortable though in terms of subject matter, and there can be things that get written about and talked about that can be really tough. And I mean, as a fan of music, there are certain records I struggle to listen to now for one reason or another.
Oh yeah, me too.
And I sort of wonder whether, can you make a record with someone who's coming in and is diametrically opposed worldview-wise to you?
I think so. But I also, when the world comes into question, I like to throw culture up on like an imaginary wall. Sometimes I think like talking about these different things that are happening in the world help illuminate where you can see a whole. So, but most of the time we're not really talking about, like, it's such an insular thing. I mean, it's why the best protest songs aren't on the notes, right? When we listen to music, we're vibrating on a feeling that's so much deeper than we know, right? So like, you can't really describe what you get from a song or why it feels this way or that. The worst protest songs are the ones that say the thing exactly. The best protest songs are the ones that like fill you with that.
Except for Ohio. Except for Ohio.
But Ohio, I would make the argument that somehow, beyond the lyric, the music fucking sounds like that. I don't know how they did it.
Oh yeah, well, that's Neil Young.
Yeah, I mean,
no disrespect to the whole CSNY, but that's just what Neil Young
does. Any day of the week, we can put Neil Young in a different category.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to shit talk. He's kept it a little classier.
Who else sings on the record, on the Bleachers album? Anybody apart from Lana?
Yeah, Florence sang and wrote on it.
So she sang and wrote on
Self-Respect. Yeah.
Because that song started with her, right?
Yeah, and that song is really, that's like the kind of song I could have never written a few years ago.
Why?
It's very conversationally direct.
That's the one where these things in life are rough and fast and unfair.
It'll be interesting to see how people take it, but what I thought was all these things happen in like marked time periods. It started with when that Kendall Jenner Pepsi commercial happened. I remember thinking to myself, totally divorced from anything it meant or who it did or didn't offend, I was just like, wow, like I can feel that in like 30 years, like this, like her giving the Pepsi will just be like in a flash in like moments to remember this time, like, Nixon going like that. They become patchworks of your life. Like I was sitting there and I was thinking, so the line is, was it the day that Kobe fell from the sky, the day that Kendall
with a Pepsi smile.
Pepsi smiled, the day that you held her last, these days of our lives, they're rough and they're fast and unfair.
Yeah.
And it's not really joking or taking the piss at anyone. I'm just sort of like the loss of a family member, a story in the news about something horrible happened, a stupid commercial that spawned like all these things are these weird patchworks that like when you're kind of in bed at night, like I guess what I was trying to reflect on was like how wild it is that you could be thinking about grief or mortality and then lunch and then envy and then rage and then dinner.
Doesn't this trace back to that moment we talked about in the control room where you experienced for the first time in your life that really difficult realization that others will move on while you staying still?
Yes. It's like that mixed with the utter randomness of the human brain. Like,
right.
I've been trying to, I don't know, I always want my music to sound as much like it is to just be around me as possible, because it's just sort of like a quick, easy way to make sure you're just being you. Like, does it really sound like me? But literally, these are the things I say or these things I want to say. And I like that song because those are things that I actually say, and yeah, it's poetic, but it's I mean, if that's something someone wanted to criticize me for, it wouldn't bother me. But
Oh,
yeah, like
it's
I think
real. It's real to you.
I think as much as about dead people as, you know, politics, as my personal life, like it's all swirling around me. And I think that one thing that the internet has done a poor job of is allowing us to remember that we have a myriad of crazy thoughts all the time, and that in one moment someone could be so on fire about something, and then they're just like, I'm tired. And you just like empathy to apathy. We're just zipping around it. So that was my intention there, and I'm interested to see how people will take that one.
Who else sang on the record?
Claude,
Yep.
Clairo.
What song is Clairo on?
Clairo sings Bartiz Strange. Clairo sings backups on Almada.
Mm-hmm.
She sings backups on Tiny Moves. Annie Clark sings backups on the first song,
Mm-hmm.
famously known as St. Vincent. You know, I worked hard in earlier parts of my career to be like, this is this, production, Bleachers.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, yeah.
It's a scene.
It is a scene, and that's where I'm at. You know, I mean, like I said, regardless of the output of the scene or the fact that some of these figures and these records get heard by a lot of people, like it's these days of my life are feeling very reminiscent of the days of when I started playing music. And I think that culture has lovingly forced us into that. You know, because if we're here sharing every move with the whole world, the records aren't going to happen, and we're going to want to jump off the roof. So I feel like the state of the world has created this sweet hibernation.
There's a song on the record. I feel like in the middle, something really seismic happens. And there's a song, Woke Up Today. Again, maybe this was written about somebody else. But that song is beautiful, the idea of feeling privileged to even just be around someone in its most simple physical form of breathing in and breathing out, which is the thing we take for granted the most of in our entire life.
Yeah.
I think human beings take for granted breath more than anything else.
Yeah, it's exactly how I felt. That's how I knew I wanted to get married too. Was there's a sort of like litigating or prosecuting in one's head of like relationship. There's a scoreboard, there's a tally, there's a pros, there's a con, there's a I get this, I don't get that I've always had. You know, this sort of like chuntering of like tennis shoes in a laundry machine kind of, and sometimes it stops and it restarts again. Every relationship I was in, and then when I met my now wife, it was just, it's not that it stopped, it was just there. It was just somewhere, it was gone. It was the first time in my life that I experienced not being in this exhausting and sometimes funny inner negotiation, and actually just enjoying someone existing.
What's that lyric that my bed was a place for the lonely?
Yeah.
I used to think that it was holy.
Well, a big part of falling in love is all the beautiful parts of it. But then there's a sort of secret, weird part, which is, well, what about all the stories I told myself that all of a sudden aren't true?
Yeah.
You know, because
what's my identity now?
yeah, what's my identity now? When forever my identity was like, oh, my parents have a weird relationship. Oh, like this generational trauma, this, blah, blah, I'm bad at this. Like work comes first. You know, all the patchwork of bullshit that you tell yourself to stand in place of the horrible truth of loneliness.
Yep. Because you deserve it, by the way. You deserve to be lonely.
You deserve it, and you've created it, and not everyone gets it all, and blah, blah, blah. Is a lot to, you know, when you find something that you do get something you want. I think this could happen in art and music too. If you start to reach people the way you wanted to, you can sort of be like, well, what is my armor now? I dealt with this when I first had any success in music, because the first decade of being on tour, my armor was, you don't get it, this is what I do, I tour, I'm here no matter what. If one person comes, I don't give a fuck. If 1,000 people come, that's cool too, but every single person matters, I don't give a shit. And it was the armor I wore.
Your metric of value means nothing to me.
Yeah, nothing. And I still carry that, but you start to get to a point where at some point it's not who you are anymore, and it would be unattractive. Like, I don't want to go in with that armor, because now I have a very passionate and intense relationship with the fan base that isn't sort of like, whether you come or not, what it's, you know, it's
so then you meet Margaret, who's your now wife, and you're faced with a decision to either try to make her fit into that identity, which is probably not going to work.
Oh, I never even.
No, but this is the choice you face.
Totally.
Or you get out of your own way.
Exactly. And to try to make someone fit into some identity that was armor or a coping mechanism is how
You fail before you even start.
Totally. Second I saw her, which was right there on that roof, I saw her and I was just like, got it. Okay. Nothing else matters. And that's how I functioned, and I changed everything about my life to be ready for it. But it is funny to look back at the stories I told myself. I wish I was a little nicer to myself in the past. But this is what I think about a lot in the studio and making records and stuff like that. It's like, maybe shut the fuck up and make the stuff and focus on what you're doing and listen to how you feel and stop putting in all these elements that are part of this like mythology.
Ordinary Heaven.
Part of me wanted to call the album that, but I didn't like the word ordinary because
It's not a great marketing tool.
it felt like it was.
Well, you're teeing it up for everybody to review it that way, right? That's the thing.
It's not a door I want to open.
It's sending the wrong message.
Yeah, and by the way, like the concept of Ordinary Heaven, as I thought about it, and it was also more that I became sure that it was a self-titled album, but I was like, it's not the front door. It is a lived-in concept. It is a later track on the album. It is an attic. You get there.
You know what it is, though, is it's an opportunity for you to pull in one of my favorite pieces of dialogue I've ever watched.
That's
Rodney
Mullen.
Who is hands down the greatest freestyle skater of all time.
Yeah. Yeah, I always wanted to skate like him, but never. He's an artist.
He's an artist, and what's beautiful about you bringing that quote into the end of that song is that you take him off his board and you just present him in an audio way as an artist.
Yeah, well, he is. I've gotten to know him, and the reason I use that is because
Stop. This is where the flex goes too far.
it's not a. So how random is
Do
this?
you know how much of a flexer this guy is? Like you don't even realize he's flexing on you until you've been sitting with him in Electric Lady Studios for 4 hours, and he tells you he's friends with Rodney Mullen. This is the moment where I might leave.
I mean, I hope he would call me
How
friend.
the fuck do you get to know Rodney Mullen?
The best story ever. So my wife was working and she was in Pittsburgh and I was on tour and she was saying, Lori does my hair, like her partner's so cool, I can't wait for you to meet Rodney, he's so interesting and introspective. I'm like, awesome, cool, I can't wait to meet him. And she's like, I'm still hanging out with him, he's so cool and like, he's so smart. And she's just like waxing on about these people, Lori and Rodney, and how great they are. And she was like, oh, and like he's a skateboarder. I was like, oh, that's so cool. And just like she kept telling me about it and she was like, I think he was really successful. And I was like, is he Rodney Mullen? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, you don't get it. You don't fucking get it. And I was like, not only do I know who he is, he's like the greatest, not only the absolute greatest of the field, but someone who meant the most to me. Anyway, he's just the coolest, most brilliant guy. We barely even talked about skating. He was at our wedding, and I just found this quote of his. I was a bit nervous to ask him because I never want to.
Who wants someone you admire to say no to you? I'm
Well,
sorry,
yeah,
it's that simple. I mean,
the only time I like asking is I do a benefit show at the end of every year. That's an easy ask because it's like it's for charity. Like, if you want to be cool, like it's not like, will you lend your voice to my? And it's a pretty intense thing that I sampled him saying, but he was cool with it. And I'm really, real proud to have him on there. The reason why I put him on there is because he's someone I love and who I grew up loving for a different reason, but now love for many reasons. And he said the thing that I was saying in the album in a very different way. And that's why I included it, because he kind of codified what I was saying.
You know, Bleachers came along at a time when you had some success to spend and you chose to go and invest those chips into building something new. And it's become your voice to tell your life story, really, I think. And this album is such a watershed moment for you personally. I can tell just by listening to the lyrics that you've achieved this whole new space. The good thing about that is that there's a whole lot of new space you can fill now. There's a whole lot of life to go and live that's in front of you. You're so busy making records with people you love and admire, getting to fulfill that wonderful experience in your life. And you've got this amazing opportunity to build a relationship. And how do you see Bleachers growing with you? How do you keep the fire of this thing that was really the sum of all the parts we've discussed in this conversation, from the kid at 15 in the van to now? How do you keep it going?
It's a question that I feel often, and then it gets answered by music. So right now, I don't know. But when I put out the first Bleachers album, Strange Desire, I mean, the first single was my whole life story. I, through the verses, just ran through anything bad that had happened in my life. You know, every album I've ever made sort of functions like an opera in a way. And so I know it changes as you get older, but I am always left, and it's funny, I'll answer this for myself and kind of all the people I work with, because it's one thing I've noticed we all do, where it's sort of you finish something and then you're kind of like in this weird, it's almost like when the plane lands. Before you get off the plane, you're just like nothing is, like the plane ride is over, but the next thing hasn't started. I'm a little bit in that phase. The answer to the question is the next song. At some point, I mean, I'm always writing, but at some point I'll, hopefully, maybe not, but at some point I'll probably write something that will open a new door in my mind and be a whole new place I want to be. That's what's happened in the past. But I don't think about it. I don't think about what's the next phase.
Keep talking, I'm just gonna grab this guitar. So, but you do feel like you've reached a landing, the plane has landed?
Oh, definitely.
I mean, there's nothing more self-mythologizing than a self-titled album.
But even any album I finish, it's like to say the album is done and I'm going to put it out is the ultimate, like, I feel, what's he going to do?
Of course it's in key. I'm not gonna do anything that anyone's gonna care about. I'm just sick and tired of looking at all these beautiful instruments and not picking them up. What's your go-to chord? If you pick up a guitar, what do you play?
First thing I play is the first thing my dad taught me, which is this little ragtime thing.
Oh, that's cool.
Because that's
Little
how he
finger
learned playing.
exercise.
Yeah, I pick up any guitar, I go. And if I'm alone, I would do it faster, but I don't want it to come off like a flex. But then it goes like, it's like real ragtimey.
Do you know how we're gonna finish this? I've had a really good time.
Had a great time.
Really enjoyed it. It starts with you showing off. No.
Yeah. Wait, sorry.
I'm just trying to. If I could just.
Yeah, hold on a
if I-
second. Yeah, one
I
second.
just-
Yeah, hold on, I got it. Okay. Yeah, what is it? Okay. All right. You know this one? It's